need battery storage to try and do that shoulder hour in the morning and after the sun sets. It actually only enhances the economics of some of these renewable energy projects because they can get more money for peaking those shoulder hours. So that's kind of the next wave. I'm a little bit more excited, and Craig and I, full disclosure, we're talking about this a little bit more. I'm excited not necessarily about the really, really huge utility scale projects. I'm excited about solar and battery storage and some of this other stuff because we can use it as individuals. I would rather encourage you guys to look towards solar on your own farms. I would look towards you utilizing it in a way that isn't utility scale, isn't 1,000 acres, maybe 20 acres, or some land that isn't usable. The versatility of solar is what really intrigues me. Sure, you can put 1 million panels in farm fields somewhere, but you can also scale it all the way to 2 solar panels on the side of a barn, or 2 solar panels on my home. That's the really exciting part of this, that individuals should have the ability to take advantage of these technologies for their own benefit. We don't have the right policies in place in Wisconsin to take advantage of that, so the utilities are building a lot of really, really big stuff. So take that for what it's worth. Right now the playing field is tilted toward the big stuff and away from the small individual gain stuff, for what it's worth. I also really, really like the tech. Nobody is talking about this, but renewable natural gas is probably Wisconsin's biggest opportunity. I mean, we have one continuous source of stuff, and it is cow manure. I mean, we have too much of it, right? We're dealing with phosphorus runoff everywhere. We have the technology, and I was floored by this when I first came into this like 5 years ago. We have the technology to take cow manure and turn it into natural gas and clean water. I don't know why we're not taking advantage of that more. There are a lot of reasons and there are some downsides to it, but increasingly businesses in other areas of this country are looking toward Wisconsin to try and invest in renewable natural gas. And I think it's a really, really big opportunity. We're well situated for that. Instead of being an importer of natural gas, if we turn enough cow manure into natural gas, we can be an exporter in the state of Wisconsin, which would be to our benefit, 100%. So I'll skip over a couple of these, but again, I think we're at a tipping point. I tell people this is a 100-year transition. This is a long, long, long-term thing. The people that want to tell you that this is going to happen in the next 10 years are lying to you. This is a very, very long transition. It took us 100 years to build what we have. It is going to take us 100 years to build out the next iteration of it. Do not let people, don't let people scare you into that. I mean, a power plant in and of itself, you're expected to get 60 years out of a coal plant. Right now, the average age of a coal plant in the United States is 41 years. So we're getting toward the tail end of our coal fleet anyway, but there are a lot of people across the world that are building coal plants right now. The average age in China of a coal plant is 12 years, and it's actually going down because they're building so many coal plants. So, so there are interesting challenges with that. But I really, really think that people should deal with renewables not as an all good thing, not as an all bad thing. These are just disruptive technologies. They are technologies like any other. They have real problems, they have real solutions, there's opportunity, there's drawbacks. Just be honest about it and let's talk about it. I tell people on the right, we're not being tricked by this. Competitive markets have driven down the cost of these technologies and they actually work. Let's embrace that for what it is. On the left, please, please stop with the 100% mandates and the getting rid of technologies, old technologies that you think don't work anymore. I cannot handle the way some folks approach this issue, 100% or 0%. Somewhere in the middle lies the truth, always, on these issues. So don't get caught up in the all or nothing argument, but for Wisconsin, we're falling behind. I want to be realistic with everybody. We have real problems with our existing infrastructure paying it off as people retire it. We have very, very real problems with intermittency and energy storage. We don't know how to integrate this stuff. I deal with a lot of questions all the time, and there aren't very good answers to the life cycle of a wind turbine. What happens when this stuff is at the end of its useful life and we need to recycle it or get rid of it? Life cycle of a solar panel is kind of the same way. Batteries as well. We're going to need to come up with entire new systems to deal with this stuff at the end of its useful life. We don't necessarily have all the answers to that. I was just talking the other day with somebody who's actually they are starting a used solar panel business down in Texas, which I think is sharp actually, because after 30 years, your solar panel still produces 75% of its energy. So if I want to use solar panel and I'll pay you maybe half what you paid for it, it's not a terrible idea actually. So there are some innovative solutions out there, but we haven't been far enough into some of these technologies to actually figure out what that looks like. I have really big problems as well with the supply of solar panels. I deal with a lot of solar developers across the state, and they have been panicking in the last 6 months because they know and have tracked that a lot of their supply chain comes from China. And the supply chain of solar panels right now, it does not look good in China. It's driven by slave labor. It's driven by very, very poor working conditions, very, very poor environmental conditions. It's incumbent on industry in our state to deal with that and responsibly source solar panels from somewhere else that isn't China, period. There aren't answers to that. We need people to actually get to the solutions to it. It's not, we can keep raising hell about it, but people either need to act responsibly or not. China gives you your cheapest solar panels, but they're also built with slave labor. So there's your upside and your downside to that. Land use concerns. I'm assuming we'll talk a little bit about that. You guys have some questions about it too. I have the same questions. I don't know if it is the best use of land to cover solar panels, especially tillable land. I don't know. I really don't. I know that solar developers will come in and pay you 8 times rental rate what you're getting for cornerstone. So the economics point you in one direction. Don't know if morally it's right. I really don't. I like to think that we can utilize these technologies in a way that keeps people on the farm and keeps people farming, as opposed to being a threat to that way of life. I do not want it to be a threat. I want it to complement what we're trying to do in rural Wisconsin. I don't know if that's possible or not. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I'm really hoping for bipartisan solutions to a lot of these problems. And like I said, I'm trying to be pragmatic and upfront about some of this stuff. So with that, is there anything else you guys wanted me to cover? Otherwise, I would get into questions and just talk with you guys about stuff here. I hope you thought that was compelling. I'm a numbers guy, and I really love charts and stuff. So I'm sorry if it was a little bit boring, but what do you think?
Are you got anything on hydrogen? Where's that going?
I don't think that it's going to be utilized. I think a lot of the transportation fuel is being crowded out by electric right now, especially on the passenger side. It'll be interesting to see what happens with larger implements because it's awfully difficult to electrify, heavy duty transpo. But hydrogen hasn't taken off because I think a lot of, especially the private sector money and investment, it's all going electric at this point. That's where a lot of the heat is. That's where a lot of the investment and funds are flowing right now, electric.
Are there any American solar panel makers?
There are. Actually, my father-in-law works at one in Iowa, just outside of Ames, Iowa. They're struggling. I won't lie to you. For a lot of reasons, American manufacturing cannot compete with Southeast Asia. We just can't. And there's a lot of reasons, partially because sometimes they use slave labor. That's one of the big reasons, right? But we are having a very, very difficult time. To be honest, tariffs probably help that situation to a certain degree. We put tariffs on imported solar panels from select countries in Southeast Asia. That helped the domestic market, but we're really, really struggling with it. Especially because solar panels are so easily transported. And you stack them up, you put them in a big ship, and they're very, very easy to transport. I have been trying to talk with developers. If you're not going to buy American-made, Canada has a very competitive industry. There are some better countries in Asia that have competitive industry. We need to shift our demand away from China wholesale. We can do that. We can do that without incurring huge costs. But it'll take us putting pressure on large-scale companies to do that.
Can you talk a little bit about microgrids?
About what, sorry?
Microgrids. They're becoming, especially new developments around the country, where they're putting in a solar field, they're using the battery, some type of peak, so they have a base load, and they're totally not connected to the web, or to the grid. So, we talk about transmission lines and all the downsides, because someone's gonna have to pay for that, we're gonna have to build them. Can you talk a little bit about microgrids and how that may be more beneficial in some of these larger projects? Provide energy to a Barron, or Rice Lake, or Cameron.
Yeah. That, if you think all the way back to why the cooperative network grew up, or why the cooperative model grew up, it's because we had communities kind of far-flung, and we needed to figure out how to get power to them, right? And we did that largely with lines. We did it with transmission lines, right? We generated power somewhere far off with a very large centralized plant, and we ran it on lines out to rural Wisconsin. We can reverse that situation entirely with the implementation of microgrids to some degree. So if you can cite local generation, cite some sort of local energy storage, and then figure out exactly where that power is going to go, you don't necessarily need to be attached to the large system anymore. And as the large system maybe gets more vulnerable, that might look better for people, actually. I like it a lot. I think it's tough to do at a large scale, just because demand is so high, you really have to cite a lot of generation. But then you get into the problem of, if so many people start going off-grid, that leaves less people to pay for the grid, and it gets more expensive for everybody. There aren't very good solutions around that problem either. But I'm a big believer in that individual energy independence. And I will share with you the story that really gets me excited, and this is at an individual household level. You can do it at a bigger level, but Ford just introduced their all-electric F-150, right? I'm not too high on it because the specs aren't great, and the mileage isn't great as far as how long you can go on one charge. But Ford actually partnered with a solar developer. So you buy an F-150, an all-electric F-150. They'll also sell you some solar panels, and then they will put something in your garage that lets you charge the truck off of your home, but also lets you send energy back toward your home. So you can power your home with your electric vehicle sitting in your garage, and Ford thinks you can get an average of 4 days of a home's electricity off a full electric F-150. That is unbelievable to me, to think about the implication of having households be energy independent in the United States of America like that. That's what really excites me about this stuff. That's really, really cool. And that's like 15 years ahead of where I thought we were going to be. Ford thinks they can do that next year, essentially. So that's just one little instance of the way these technologies could start to come together to give all of us some level of energy independence. I love the national security implications of that. That's awesome. Good luck bombing the grid if I don't give a crap about the grid, right? So anyway, I hope that covered a little bit. Answered some, yeah, sorry.
I don't know, maybe a little bit of questions, but so we're shutting down 350 megawatt coal plants in our country. China's building 2, 3, 4, 5 a month in our country, making it much harder to compete. But just from a standpoint of, it takes 4 to 5 acres solar panels to make 1 megawatt here?
6 acres.
6 acres? Is that true in Texas?
It's true because of the panel itself, yes. So that's the efficiency of the panel itself, right? You're going to use roughly 6 acres to produce 1 megawatt from a solar panel, from solar. That acreage has been coming down as the efficiency and the density of the panels increases. You actually have to take up less space. So I think I was quoted 8 or 9 years ago, you'd have been looking at 10 acres for every 1 megawatt, right? But they figured out how to increase the efficiency and the energy density of the solar panels themselves. So you're actually pulling that number in slowly. I'd like to see them do a hell of a lot more work on it, but that's the truth almost universally across the country right now, yes.
You talked about tipping point in base load. So obviously I have to have base load if I'm going to have solar and wind. And that base load's got to be able to stop and start relatively quick. What is that point in terms of how much renewable can I have in wind and solar
honest answer is that nobody really knows right now. I've read studies that put numbers all over the place. I don't think the smart set has a real answer to that question yet. When do you put so much renewable energy that's intermittent and variable onto the grid that it becomes a big problem? I don't think anybody knows the answer to that yet. Like I said, Iowa just got 60% last year annually of their electricity from wind alone. That blows every other state out of the water. And they did it without problems, right? I think we had 2 weeks worth of polar vortex last year, didn't we? So the honest answer, I think, is that there isn't a very good answer to that right now. We're gambling in some degree off in this direction. I think Wisconsin has an advantage here because we're further behind all of these other states that we have some road to run where we can site in-state renewable generation without worrying about an unstable grid for a period of time. That's the best answer I can give you, an honest one. Yes, sir.
How much more efficient is solar energy in Texas on average as it is here with cloudy days, with winter time?
You go further south, so I have been told you go south of Mason-Dixon line. You're probably looking at anywhere from 15 to 25% increase in the output of your given solar panel. They just have more sun than we do. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. So we're at a disadvantage there. You know, the northern states are at an absolute disadvantage. We're not as bad off as some states. You know, I was told the other day, Germany has had a very poor experience with their renewable energy generation. They handled it very poorly, in my opinion. They used a lot of government policy that forced solar into areas that it just doesn't make any sense. The very southern border of Germany is essentially Canada on the access line. So Germany has gone whole hog into solar. And they're further north than we are, even than northern Wisconsin, than the UP is. So they're having a poorer experience with it than we are. But yes, the further south you go, just the better this stuff is, the more sun you have. Yes, sir.
Two-part question. What is the lifespan of the storage that you talk about, part A? And part B is, where does it go when it's used up?
Yeah, so the lifespan, right now they're deploying energy storage for a 10-year life frame. What you do with the batteries after is anybody's guess. Again, that's me being honest and just giving you an honest answer. Private companies right now are struggling to put in place recycling programs. I will give them some credit. It's kind of the chicken or egg scenario, right? We haven't deployed a lot of batteries at large scale yet, so not a lot of them are towards the point where you have to figure out what you are going to do with them. So there's no supply for a market to show up in recycling. I hope that one does. We're going to have to deal with it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you put this battery, whatever you're talking about, 4 or 5 acres or whatever. So you put that in, assuming it's 100% efficient the day you flip the switch.
Ready to go.
After 10 years, how much efficient is it?
Typically you probably drop about 2% efficiency a year.
So it's at 80% efficient after 10 years.
That's been the experience with some of the larger scale electric vehicle batteries too. You're losing about 2% a year, give or take.
It's kind of like your cell phone. It's really good when you get it. After 5, 6, 7 years, charge every day.
Yeah, same with your cell phone battery, right? I mean, it only has so many turns in it, right? It's only built for that. So, like I said, total honesty to you guys, I'm really worried about the recycling thing. You're going to have to come up with entire different industries to figure out how to recycle this stuff. I have talked with folks like Generac in Milwaukee. They're leaning really heavily into the battery storage game. They're leaning into solar and energy storage as kind of a complement to their generator business as well. A kind of interesting outcrop of that. Generac thinks that the chemistry, I'm not a chemist, so I can't speak too well to it, but they think they can recycle up to 95% of the components of a battery and then reuse that stuff, right? I don't know the cadmium and all the stuff that goes into it. They think they can get there, but again, it's hard to ask people to recycle something when we don't have anything recyclable of it yet. You know what I mean? That's difficult to do. Which one starts first? So I think people are going to need to keep demanding that answer from folks until there's a credible answer out there. Yes, sir.
For the small business owner, for the small farmer, for the homeowner, are there any incentives being offered anywhere in the states in any governmental units for, well, incentives?
Yeah, so this stuff is all subsidized at the federal level, right? You have a 30% tax credit for both wind and solar, but solar at any level gets a 30% federal tax credit. You can try Focus on Energy at the state level here. They have some grants available in certain select instances to do solar, to do your own distributed solar. But the truth is, no, there's not a whole lot in this state. Other states are pushing that a lot harder than we are. You can argue whether that's good or bad. I'm not sure. I'm excited about the opportunity for all of us to take advantage of that market eventually. I'll be totally honest, one of the things that I think we need to figure out in this state is, what is the proper value of somebody who owns a solar panel? If they put a solar panel on their house, what do we pay them for that power? I'm paying 13 or 14 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity right now down in Stoughton. Your utility or cooperative is probably looking to pay you maybe 2 cents a kilowatt hour for any power that you would sell back. I think that there's a lot more middle ground between 14 and 2 to properly value the power that somebody is making, and maybe they're making a little more power and putting it out onto the grid. I can't answer specifics on that, and it's maybe controversial in this crowd a little bit, but we need to figure out how we properly value an independent solar panel before we really start to build them out, because otherwise it's going to become a big problem. And that's where you derive a lot of your value from. I want a return on investment, right? I don't want to buy solar panels out front and then never make my money back. That's not entertaining to me at all, right? I'm not doing this as a charity case. I want to make money on it. And the return on investment is heavily, heavily influenced by how much money you're going to get back if you make too much energy and sell it back to the grid, period. So we have to, I think, figure that out in the state to some degree. Yes, sir.
I think one of the issues for transmission, whether I build a large solar project or have a small solar project, I mean, more solar than I'm using, that has to go on a line. Whose line is that? How far does it have to go? How can I get it from my house to his house?
Yeah.
And what technology, who's going to support that technology, who's going to buy that technology?
Yep.
And that's the downside of any of the renewables, whether it's wind or solar.
Yep.
Because transmission lines are going to be huge. The dependence on electricity, right now in Barron County, 7%, only 7% of our customers have an electric vehicle. It would take up one complete of our substation. So
At 7%?
at 7%.
Really?
One. So, I mean, there's a lot to work out
Huge
before we
infrastructure. Right.
get there.
Yep.
Nuclear. We talked about natural gas, kind of being a winner in this thing. You can only put so much natural gas on site. That's what happened in Texas.
Right.
A nuclear plant, very small. You want to recharge those once every year and a half, 2 years.
Yep.
Lowest maintenance ever, and the safest. But we have lost it in our, it's not in the dialogue at all. It would be the best energy source, best renewable. We have 70 years of spent fuel rides in this country. We could survive the whole country without taking another ounce of uranium for 70 years.
Yeah. Small modular reactors, so they've figured out the technology. Essentially they're figuring out how to run nuclear power plants off a manufacturing line and then assemble their components in areas. So instead of large, very, very large, inefficient, always cost overrun infrastructure projects, you're essentially talking about building Lego parts and then putting them together as a small modular reactor. It's a brilliant idea. It's still not yet in the commercial phase. I want that to get to commercial phase as quickly as possible because I think it's a huge answer for us, 100%. But I also, I recognize nuclear power plants have drawn a lot of opposition locally as well. It's tough to cite those things anywhere in our states or anywhere in the country, because neighbors, understandably, I don't want to listen. There are less neighbors than you deal with when it comes to renewable energy generation, but neighbors also don't want to be sited next to a nuclear power plant either. But I agree with you. I think people are downplaying that because right now it's not at the commercial phase. In 5 years, I hope that they get that to commercial phase, and then we really start going on it.
Because if you're looking at global warming, whether I'm putting solar panels that reflect heat,
Yeah.
and I'm not vulnerable. In the sense I'm not burning gas, but it's not a total one-to-one buyout. There's other
Correct.
issues in terms of global warming. Nuclear is undoubtedly.
This is why, again, I get frustrated. If you are motivated by climate change concern, motivated by global warming, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what they're calling it now, wind and solar are not your 100% answer. They just are not. I know that they are being deployed at large scale now for the first time really in the last 5 years. It's exciting for a lot of people who have been looking for a solution to that problem, but it is not your 100% solution. We need more, if that's what drives you. I get frustrated sometimes because I think the climate change issue for a lot of people crowds out consideration of anything else. And it is all about trying to pull carbon out of the atmosphere or whatever. I think that there is room for us to have other concerns about this. We need to balance other things. So it gets frustrating for me, which is why I kind of say I'm not motivated personally by it at all, because I think more attention needs to be paid to other concerns at this point.
Because we've kind of been put in a situation, what's the alternative? If I'm knocking down a coal power plant, and I'm shutting it down.
Good luck. We've been put in a good luck situation. Almost like, well, we'll see if it works.
At some point in time, without base load, get used to rolling blackouts, because you're gonna have.
Yeah.
I'm not against solar, I'm not against wind.
Right.
I just think, I'm with you, we have somehow tied up the best solution and put it in a room that no one wants to talk about. And
Yeah. Any other questions at all? So one of the things I would encourage you guys, I know, Craig and I talked a little bit ahead of time about, some of the issues that you guys are having locally, with project development. I would encourage you guys to work in other areas of the states. I deal in a lot of communities that are going through the solar development process at a large utility scale. Developers will work with communities. They will do joint development agreements where you lay out solar panel coverage, where you lay out how high the panels can be, where you lay out what the easements look like, where you lay out a lot of very specific things about the development that I think are really important to the community at the end of the day. Other developers are doing that across the state, and they are working very closely with county boards, with local townships. They're working very closely with local leaders. I would encourage you guys to do that. If you have concerns specifically, I can tell you all day long, there's so many millions of acres of farmland in the state of Wisconsin, and commodity prices are what they are right now, and we actually pay farmers some degree to not farm land, so maybe we should take some of it out of production. I can tell you all the statewide stuff, but it doesn't matter really to a local community, because 1,500 acres of farmland in any local community is a huge impact. It is a lot of acreage to take out of production. It's a big change. So I think that you guys obviously should have some say as a local community in this stuff. In my experience, although I don't know the specific developer out here, I'll admit that I didn't look it up. Development companies are looking to work in ways to make that happen, in good ways to make it happen. So I encourage you guys to look at that. I hope that answers some question on that a little bit.
Just feed off that a little bit.
Yeah.
Looking at Wisconsin's Public Service Commission,
Yes.
back in, I think, the mid-70s, the Wisconsin State Legislature gave them the green light to permit renewable energy projects.
Or any energy project.
Energy, yeah, okay.
Anything over, so, sorry, not to interrupt you, Craig, but anything over 100 megawatts
Yeah,
automatically goes,
98, they added 100 megawatts, but.
automatically goes to the PSC.
And my question, I guess, is, what kind of local community input can be in that permitting process?
I have seen really, really long joint development agreements. I mean, anything from what the developer does with the roads that they're gonna use to construct the project afterward. They have to replace so many miles of roads that they use. I mean, I've seen very, very long development agreements with communities. Pages and pages and pages of agreement. There is room for input here. But again, I think you have to be coordinated and you have to be stern as a community on it. And this is not